Hello, and welcome to the very first episode of the Zillennial Support Group podcast. This is Marriya Schwartz, and I'm joined by my other host, Silvana Smith, and we're really excited to get started for all of our 90s and early 2000s babies. Hello.
Woo.
Silvana, would you like to read the bio off of our SoundCloud that has one follower who is a
It
porn bot?
it is in fact a porn bot. You are correct. Zillennial Support Group podcast is a safe space to unleash and relive your childhood memories and trauma from the late 90s to early 2000s. We rewatch and rehash old cultural moments from decom movies to the Amanda Show as we desperately try to escape the reality of today. So follow along with us, 97 babies, Marriya and Silvana, as we reminisce on the days before iPhones and bond over old Harry Potter fan fiction. Zillennial Support Group podcast is a subsidiary of Morton Third Floor Productions. I hope that was satisfactory.
Thank you, Silvana, for that. Yeah,
Thank
so
you.
if you're interested in that, keep listening. Yeah, so I think this is a really perfect medium for two people who hate the sound of their own voices.
I it really is. Um, I I honestly I have hated my voice my whole life. It's not just something that crept up with the our idea to start a podcast, which we held off. We held off a full year before following suit with every single other person in the entire world of starting a podcast during the pandemic.
Yeah.
So
Congrats to us.
congrats to us is right. Um, so we're basically just like inspired, I guess, to start this podcast by our haunting sense of nostalgia during this time in our lives where the current events of today are just, they're not great. We want to escape. We don't
Yeah.
want to think about it. I saw a tweet the other day where it was like, oh, by the 12 months of the pandemic, it says, my nostalgia, like the rest of me, has lost all recognizable sense of time. I miss Blockbuster, which I feel very deeply. I feel like our nostalgia transcends space and time at this point in the pandemic. This
Yeah.
isn't nostalgia for pre March 2020. It's just nostalgia before all of it got started.
Yep. Yep. I do miss Blockbuster. I saw this TikTok of someone who created a whole video store in their basement, which is really
Oh,
incredible. But just Blockbuster was such a simpler time, and I mean, we have Redbox now,
mm,
but it's just not
yeah, it's
it's
not the
not the
same.
same.
I have such vivid childhood memories of going to Blockbuster. And I remember specifically renting The Parent Trap a million times. Like every single, like we could have just bought the VHS tape, and I think we did at one point, but every single time we'd like spend a half hour looking through the stacks, and then we are like, nope, we want to watch the same movie.
I got Uptown Girls a lot.
You did? I remember
Yeah,
that movie.
that was
I
a good
think
movie.
I think by the time I watched that movie, it like ABC Family had started showing it,
Mm.
that Blockbuster became
Remember
less of a
ABC
thing.
Family
Oh wow,
before it was
TBT.
Freeform or
I
something?
reject freeform. I reject it. I don't acknowledge it. We're
Let's
in
also talk about the
latest
Disney
news.
Channel
Disney
logo.
Channel.
How that changed.
Has it changed?
It changed. It's no longer like the doo 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 doo.
But
It's like something completely different. It's just kind of
no
like
Mickey Mouse ears?
I think it is Mickey Mouse ears, but it's not the Mickey Mouse ears that we all know and love.
Wow.
So heartbreaking.
Just every day I see new signs of how my childhood is dead
Yep.
and I'm getting older.
And we have to
Um
pay taxes now, and it's
yeah,
bad.
it's really depressing. But when we decided to launch a podcast about our specific brand of nostalgia, where it's
Hmm.
like late 90s, early 2000s, that like in between Gen Z and millennial thing. We wanted to be, it is a very specific time of history, but we also wanted to be very inclusive of anyone who remembers that time. It is, we are a support group here. There is no, we know there's a war going on out there between the millennials and the Gen Zs, and we are a safe space. We are a support group.
Yeah.
This is not a battleground podcast. We come in peace. And
because we
we're just here to reminisce and be like, damn. And that's really it.
because we're also now all on the same team of being against the royal family after
That is
that
very
Oprah
true.
interview.
The one thing that I think will unite all Americans, all shapes and sizes and ages, is overthrowing the monarchy of England.
Yeah. Yeah.
You want to recap
Been
what
there, done that.
just happened in this historic time of early March 2021 with
Uh
Meghan Markle?
well, they went in for their interview with Oprah, Prince Harry, or I guess not even Prince Harry. I don't even know. Does he have a last name? Does he need to get one? Where do you get one? Is he Harry Markle at this point?
They actually they their last name is technically Mountbatten Windsor. I don't know
I
if
would
his
change
last name,
that.
I think his last name is just Windsor because of the Queen,
I
but
really want him to
Archie's last
change
name is
it to like
Mountbatten. I watched The Crown, so I
Harry
feel like
Smith.
I know what's up.
I hope he's like Harry Smith or Harry Johnson or something.
Yeah. Honestly, I get a little whenever somebody uses Smith or Johnson as like, haha, common last name, no identity,
Sorry.
I'm like, my last name is Smith. I didn't know if I
Sorry.
wanted to release that kind of public and private information to the public, but I do in fact have the most common last name if
Well,
anybody wants to steal my identity.
but it's been interesting seeing the interview and hearing that the British royal family might be racist. Like what?
What?
The
Racism.
the country of colonizers is racist?
Right? British people. Wow. Who would have thought?
But I saw this one tweet by this one guy um who said that Harry has gone against England and everyone who starts a war with England loses.
I saw that tweet too. I
How
was like,
old were you when you found out America exists?
yeah, and I'm like, we did beat England twice. Like it wasn't a fluke accident. We beat you twice.
I mean,
But
With France helped.
yeah,
Oui,
but I
oui.
have yeah, I have seen a lot of like gifs on Twitter now of Oprah, just all the reactions that she had during
Mhm.
the interview. So intense.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
mean, because I think a big problem was like I guess people are still shocked by the idea of like intermarriage between races, which
yeah.
is wild because
Well,
it's 2021.
yeah, it's interesting because um I also saw a tweet that was like, imagine running to America to escape racism.
Mhm. I know.
Which especially after a year like 2020 is like kind of hard to believe, but I do think at least in, in the places I grew up, like intermarriages are relatively like, this isn't the 70s where, you know, it was like an extreme safety issue,
Mhm.
whereas they really had to like, they feared losing their security and then they ran away to Canada because they were like, we don't have enough security to protect our child. And I also saw a lot of commentary that was like, Megan is one of the, she's white passing sometimes, like she's a very light skinned mixed woman. And it's still like, they still worried about the skin color of their baby. Like it was terrible. It was a terrible, very, very antiquated reaction. And even the word antiquated is like pretty mild of a way to describe it, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, I think it is refreshing that in the early 2000s, this idea of intermarriage did come up in our Disney Channel original movies.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
they tried to be pretty progressive. I feel
yeah,
a segue coming on.
Oh, yep, there we go. That was very smooth when you announced it's a segue. Um,
Thank you.
yeah, so today we're talking about The Luck of the Irish. And
The
that is
old Disney Channel movie.
yes, the old Disney Channel movie.
Because I feel like it was very apt. We have St. Patrick's Day coming up, and we
Hmm.
have a famous interracial marriage in the news right now.
Yeah.
So why not talk about the OG interracial interracial marriage of being someone from Ohio, and then you have someone who is a leprechaun.
Yeah, yeah,
The true meeting of the cultures, the two cultures,
exactly. Instead
humans
of
and
having
leprechauns.
actual two races, it's
Yeah.
just two white people.
Also, not to give away the ending, but we never find out the heritage of the dad. He's just from
He's
Ohio.
a spy.
He is a spy, although he looks pretty Celtic. I mean, he's got red undertones in his beard.
He's
You
from
know,
Cleveland.
the cleave. Also, I'm pretty sure the basketball team from Ohio is the Celtics. Celtic. Is that from Boston? I have no idea. I'm just wildly guessing. Anyways, so do you want to go over maybe like a base summary of the movie for
Sure,
those who haven't watched it?
sure, yeah. So if you have other things to do and haven't been rewatching Disney Channel movies, basically, The Luck of the Irish starts out with a boy named Kyle Johnson.
Who
Um,
in my movie notes that I took, I actually referred to as Ryan the whole time because I only acknowledge him as the actor, the famous Disney Channel original movie actor, Ryan Merriman.
Perfect.
Merriman, the OG. But
Is
continue.
he? Yeah, it's such so Robin Hood of him.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, no, I mean, Kyle, like I think he's famously from the Johnson and Johnson family. So thank you for the vaccine, Kyle. But basically,
Wow,
yeah,
that's
I
so
know.
true. He's still the effect of his career
Yeah.
on the
Um,
health of Americans.
but basically his only sorry, Kyle Johnson's only
It's okay.
personality traits are that he is lucky and he plays basketball. And other than that, we don't know about him.
Yeah.
Um,
The classic all-American white boy.
exactly. But
Mhm.
he's also a leprechaun, half leprechaun, as we later find out. Um,
Mhm.
because I am so sorry. Um, and so basically, um, Kyle has this magic coin that no one tells him is magical, even though they trust a teenager with it because teenagers are, famously
Yeah, I lost so
responsible.
much. I lost so many things when I was a kid.
How many lucky coins are in Lost and Founds right now from leprechauns? But I don't know. Because I feel like you would find the most like how are people losing socks and their entire wardrobe in Lost and Found? Like what happened?
Yo, okay, so this is a total detour, but it'll take a quick sec. One time in fifth grade, um, we found a lost pair of underwear just in our classroom. Just someone just like
Something
lost their
happened
underwear.
there.
This is just, but that's what kids do. Like random shit happens. But this guy, he held on to his coin necklace.
Yeah, yeah. Until
Yeah.
he finds
Until he
out,
didn't.
until he didn't. Yeah, and so
Yeah.
basically he has this best friend, Russell, who says that he's part Cherokee, and then that's kind of glossed
I
over.
made a note of that too.
And
Um,
then this girl, Bonnie, who is apparently a part of every single committee, comes up and asks him what he's doing for Heritage Fest. And he's like, "What? We're all Americans. This is the most pro American film. This is like such
it really is
propaganda."
on every level.
It is,
Every
yeah.
level.
And then he's like, "Oh, we're just from here." And she's like, "Everyone's from somewhere," which he seems to not know, even though he later talks about maybe his parents were radicals in the 60s and had to go underground. So he knows about that, but doesn't know how genetics work and
Yeah.
travel and immigration. So that's thanks, Kyle. Um, and so he ends up going to an Irish festival and
Mm,
finds out that he's Irish. And then his lucky coin is stolen, and everyone in his family starts
yeah.
turning into leprechauns.
Yeah.
And they have to go on a quest to get their coin back so that he can play baseball, not
Yeah.
even change the
Um
world, just so he can win the state championship, the
yeah,
highest
yeah.
state.
So basically he needs to get his lucky coin back, so he's lucky enough to win his basketball game and restore the luck of the clan of his family, which
Mhm.
basically manifests in that they're able to pass as humans and not leprechauns, and that's what they desperately need to restore. So, which is a lot to there's a lot to unpack. I have so many notes, but basically, before we dive into the more gritty aspects of the scenes and stuff, I have a few fun facts
Yeah.
about the film that I've researched.
So basically, the film, well, you can tell when you watch it. It was made in 2001. It actually premiered, well, it was made in 2000, but it premiered March 9th of 2001, right before St. Patrick's Day. It was filmed in Utah. If you notice the mountains in the background of all the shots and the outside scenes, the villain of the movie is played by that guy from Psych, that cop who's not very good at his job.
But
Have you
he's
seen
he's
Sight?
also in Gallivant and Supernatural and
He's
everything.
also in Supernatural. He's one of those Canadian actors who's just like all the side characters of every TV show. And basically, okay, so here's the real fun fact. I did a little research on the origin of the phrase "luck of the Irish." So there are two probable origin stories, basically, of this term, where they're both derogatory. Luck of the Irish isn't a compliment, apparently. It started off by basically the Irish people had been through a lot of strife. They'd gone through a plague. They've when they emigrated, they faced hardship and not being able to find good jobs and stuff like that. So people would be like, "Oh, luck of the Irish," because all these terrible things had happened to the Irish people. You know, they'd been bullied and brutally murdered by the British and the English. You know, a ton. Uh, so it's kind of like a sarcastic, haha, you're so lucky, all these terrible things happened to you. Or in a more recent, not so recent, but in another sort of idea was that in the 1800s, when Irish immigrants had come to America, that some of them had started going west as part of the gold rush. And so a lot of people didn't like the Irish. They thought they were stupid and unskilled laborers. And so when Irish people started going out west and becoming rich as part of the gold rush, and like, you know, all these gold coins or whatever, I have no idea. Um, they were like, oh, luck of the Irish. That's why they became successful and got rich when they went west, is because they have no skills. They were just lucky.
Oh.
So it wasn't like a good flattering term to like say someone has the luck of the Irish. It was like, oh, you just got it because of luck. You don't have any skills.
Thanks for
Um,
covering all the bases, Disney Channel.
so yeah,
Can you
a little
believe that
cultural
this is the
insight.
same company that brought us that incredible Pocahontas film where
Oh my god.
she
But the
falls in
way
love?
but it's honestly kind of sad because we are both babies of intermarriages. And
Mhm.
so when I was a kid, I would like see these movies where there was like two parents different from each other, and I'd be like, "Oh, something to identify with." And then I get older and I'm like, "Oh, these are terrible, terrible movies with
Yeah.
bad messages."
Was your mother a leprechaun?
No, actually, my dad is the Irish one.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Yeah, and then my mom was the token non-Irish person in the
Oh, wow.
relationship, which every relationship apparently has or doesn't have. I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah.
But
'Cause I was noticing there might be some dye on your hair, and I thought it was possibly the leprechaun.
some
I
dye in
didn't
my
know.
hair. I have dyed my hair red in the past. There are photos of me
'Cause
on
at the
social
bottom
media
of your hair,
at the
there's
bottom. Yeah,
a
the
little it's
token
a bit
Irish
redder.
part of my
Yeah,
strands.
and
Yeah,
so
and
I
then
was
you have the
thinking,
non-Irish roots.
yeah,
But
where's the
okay,
coin, Silvana?
right? Um, so two more fun facts. We have
Oh.
Ryan Merriman. Merriman is 37 years of age currently. I think he was about 15 when he filmed this. Yes, I did the math quickly in my head. That checks out. Um, I was surprised to find out he was so young still, that he was still in his 30s.
We
Um,
thought he was dead.
Because he's been such an icon for the past 20 years that I was like, he has to be in his 40s, and he's not. He actually started out pretty young. He didn't reach the same height of notoriety afterwards since his days on DComs, but he did have appearances in the movie Final Destination and a part in the series Pretty Little Liars. I looked up what he looks like now. He hasn't aged terribly, but he has a goatee. So I would recommend people unstanning him if they still have a soft spot in their heart for him. I don't think any man with goatee facial hair should be championed by the public. That's just a personal. Oh my God. She pulled up a picture. That's what he looked like back in 2001 with the plastic surgery.
Do you know if he's still acting?
He is still acting.
So there's a chance of Luck of the Irish too?
Yeah. At least he was still involved with projects in like 2018, 2019 before the pandemic. So, but I mean, he's fine. He's financially taken care of. He doesn't really need to work anymore. For those who are only listening with the audio, Marriya is now stroking the cheek and spiky bleached hair of our leading man very lovingly. She's got a lovely, caring soul. My final fun fact before we dive into our specific thoughts on the movie is that there was another film called Luck of the Irish made in America back in 1948, before the 50s. So when, being Italian or Irish was still more of a thing. And this film is like so much older, like 52, 53 years older than the film. And it has kind of a better, more progressive message than our old Luck of the Irish 2001 film. I have not seen it, but looking at the Wikipedia page, the general gist of the movie is this man in New York sort of discovering and rediscovering his roots as an Irish person when he meets this young woman and this leprechaun.
So that's how it always happens, isn't it?
Right? But basically, they say that the general premise of the movie is based on the idea of returning to his roots and like reclaiming his Irish heritage, which Luck of the Irish tries to do. But I think we'll get into how it really doesn't do that later in this episode. I think the only pride people are having by the end of Luck of the Irish is pride in being an American, which isn't the same as being having pride about being Irish. But
wait, can I ask you something, Silvana?
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is actually the inspiration of the Scorsese film Irishman.
Yeah,
film? Yeah.
It's actually not widely known,
Yeah.
but he actually optioned the rights of the Luck of the Irish movie in order to make The Irishman.
Wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's actually why Ryan Merriman has an Oscar as his small part in Oscar, Emmy, I have no idea, Golden Globe, as a sort of consultant role on the film.
Wow.
The only other fun fact I have is like JFK. He was Irish. The Irish people loved him.
I thought you were going to say he was in the movie. And I was like, I feel like the timelines aren't adding up.
Yeah, there was definitely the Irish people of Ireland definitely claimed JFK as one of their own. There used to be very pleasant relations between America and Ireland. I don't know if it still stands today, but there definitely was that idea of like after their culture being sort of pillaged by the British so many times that like anybody who has Irish heritage should like claim it and be proud of it. Yeah. So that sentiment of like reclaiming your Irish heritage is popular for the Irish culture specifically, but also for a lot of people who've gone through situations where they were forced to assimilate into American culture or like WASP culture in order to, be successful. And that sort of goes into what our Luck of the Irish movie is about, is because it's a movie sold under the guise of claiming your heritage, when really it's just a movie promoting forced assimilation and capitalism. And we can start off in the beginning with our thoughts, but I do want a little sneak peek into my epiphanies later into the movie, where I just wrote the line, movie sells capitalistic lie. And then also the moral of the story, which is real power is white boy confidence, which that's what the characters strive for by the end of the movie. Not to reclaim their heritage, but to say, hey, what's real important is that we all try to be American and as white as possible.
So
and lucky
and lucky, because they have this part of the capitalistic lie that they sell is that you don't need luck. If you work hard and try hard, just like the Irish immigrants of century, you can make it. All you need is to work hard. You don't need luck. When in fact, there's a lot of discrimination that prevents hardworking individuals from succeeding in life.
Yeah.
Maybe not in basketball, but basketball isn't real life, despite what many
Whoa.
Disney Channel original movies try to tell you. It was a big revelation when I was a kid that basketball is not everything. And in protest, I only played soccer. But yeah. So although I do love the Ohio representation in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
We love the state of Ohio. Ohio is for lovers.
Virginia was for lovers.
Homeland. That is true. Ohio is for lovers is an emo song.
Oh.
Or is it a band? I'm ashamed of my lack of emo knowledge, but it is the heartland of Midwest emo, besides Chicago. Sorry.
Oh, wow. Hopefully the porn bot isn't from Chicago.
But yeah, but going back to the beginning of the movie where we can start to share our thoughts more specifically, there is that sort of like call to action of these characters being asked, well, where are you from? Where are you really from? Because I don't know if you've been asked this question.
Oh, I'm asked a lot.
I, as pale as I am in this window right here, I've been asked where I'm from many times, a lot when I was a kid too. And I'd always say, I'm from here.
Yeah.
And it would
but that didn't work as well
anyone.
as it did for Mr. Johnson in the film.
Yeah, especially I was never lied about my heritage, which okay, this is also something I wanted to address, because the mother lying to her son about being Irish is something that did happen very often for actual kids of Irish immigrants, although that wasn't like a huge common thing. There was instances for white passing immigrants to lie about their heritage in order to escape discrimination and sort of assimilate to the culture better, to reap to sort of circumvent the capitalistic structure of discrimination. But
I think there's like a certain privilege in like being able to be lied to. Like you can't like take like, I mean, like I'm Indian and you can't just be like, hey, we're both white. Like it's fine.
But
we're both American.
Specifically in Irish families and Cuban families, if they were able to pass as non-Irish and non-Cuban, non-people of non-WASP cultures, they would, and there would be these people who do research like in the 60s and 70s and then just find out that they were actually children of immigrants from these places that they knew nothing about, and they lost the culture because of that.
And how progressive that Kyle had to do the work in like middle school or however old he is.
Yeah, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what this movie means when it associates luck with being able to hide your culture visually. Like the reason he is lucky correlates with his ability to hide his red hair and his pointy leprechaun ears and his shortness.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like luck and lucky are used like 76, 77 times in the whole movie. And so it feels like less about like Irish and more about like the luck of blending in, I guess.
Yeah, it's basically like a pro assimilation movie, and
Mhm.
it sort of demonizes characters who um show more of these Irish traits. Um and there's a point where like his grandfather says, or he asks his grandfather like, "Oh, why aren't you turning into a leprechaun faster? Like why are you turning slower than my mom or me?" And he's like, "Oh, old men don't change that fast."
I like that part because it was like he can't get it up anymore. Like, he just needs a wee bit of Viagra.
Oh my god. Yeah. But yeah, the villain character is the character who is the only character who goes full leprechaun with like the face like putty or whatever to change his facial features, the full ears, the red hair. Whereas when the
And I
mom's a leprechaun, she's just like the same but with curly hair and is small.
Yeah, but I think ironically, the, like, only Irish characters that don't speak in such a strong stereotyped Irish accent are Seamus's the villain's lackeys. They speak like they're, like,
Oh
from,
yeah.
like, Jersey, and it's like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah. Sort of like I like Irish mob characters. I have no idea.
Yeah. But I
And
think
then I
just,
just
like,
kind of took that.
it was interesting to see how much they stereotyped Irish, like, the for one of the first things that happens is his mom just starts speaking in this accent, and then she gives him a bunch of food in just a pail, like, not even, like, a school box, like, suddenly she's just forgotten how to pack a lunch, what, like, I don't know, freezer pack is? I don't know.
Yeah,
Just
it's
gives
not
him
that
a
she's
pail.
like her Irish culture is coming out, is that she is reverting back to the Irish way of life of like the 1830s or whatever, like
Yeah.
old Ireland, like from when the time they immigrated. I think they refer to at one point in the movie 200 years. The
Mhm.
grandfather is like, "Oh, 200 years ago," as if he's
Well
200 years old.
yeah, no, because the grandfather is also super stereotyped that he is named Riley O'Reilly, and he owns a
Yeah,
potato chip factory, but it
right?
seems
Which
so
also
they
felt very, very like Harry Potter Cho Chang to me. Like,
Mhm.
okay, most popular Irish last name as both first and last name.
But then
But
it's like they explain on the tour that in, like, the late 1800s or something, they discovered that if you sliced a potato too thin, it turns into a potato chip, and then the grandfather says that it was luck that he sliced the potato too thin, which implies that he was the one who did it in the late 1800s, and then we find out that his mother is still alive and in good health. So Kyle also just found out that he might be immortal, and, like, no one ever talks about that ever again.
yeah, like how the leprechauns like never seem to die.
Mhm. Well, the
Um,
other part of the leprechaun powers is when they're breaking into a lock, and suddenly he has leprechaun powers, and he just, like, zaps it and makes it go, and that never comes up anytime else.
yeah,
It's so weird. And then also part of the sort of like negative connotations of like being Irish that they sort of put in this movie was when they find like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Um, and the grandfather is like somehow now greedy, which he's sort of like a relatively, he's like an estranged member of the family who has like reprimandable traits, but at the end of the day is reunited because he accepts his white son in law, accepting the white culture. But I also am like, it's very interesting that they make the non-wasp culture the one that's like rejecting the mixing, whereas the white guy is supposedly the one that's chill.
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I thought, like, I don't know. I
but
think the
the sorry,
No, go
but
ahead.
the line with the grandfather when he like suddenly becomes greedy and is like, "Oh, we should take the rest of the coins," and the Ryan Merriman is like, "No, we came here to get our luck back, not to steal. Stealing's
Mhm.
bad." And then I'm like, "Oh, so now like all these immigrants are just stealing?" That's a stereotype.
Yeah.
But
Well, I also
because the grandfather is like, "Oh, well, like I've lived such a hard life, like I've suffered, like I deserve this." And I'm like, why are you trying to paint this immigrant as having that crime mentality
Yeah.
when it's not like a morality issue? It's capitalism drives those who are impoverished to commit crimes because their government refuses to provide them basic needs and social safety nets. But anyways,
Yeah.
what were you saying?
Well, I don't know. I think that the idea, I mean, I know that they wanted to do a movie about leprechauns, but I think just the idea that they did so much about like the hardship of Irish, and I'm not trying to diminish that, but the fact that they surrounded him with two best friends who are people of color seemed
Also,
like a weird take because there was that
it
one
was really
time
weird.
when
We don't learn about either of those cultures
no, no, because
until
there's
the
well,
very end where she pops out in this
there's a
dress
moment,
that I don't
yeah,
recognize.
and she says in the car when it's raining, and she's like, "It was really hard when the Irish first arrived. They had to work the jobs that no one wanted. They were paid less than they deserved." And then his friend Russell, who's black, said, "At least they were paid." And then we just move
Yeah.
on.
There's one shot of the dad raising his eyebrows and being like, "Oh yeah, true." And then they just cut to it. And also, again, like you said before, how in one of the first scenes, Russell goes, "Oh, I'm part Cherokee." When the girl says, "You know, everybody's from somewhere. We're all immigrants," and then he says, "Yeah, me too. I'm part Cherokee," as if like the joke was that he forgets that Native Americans didn't immigrate. But
Well, then
um,
that was also
so
a
we have
weird thing that they discussed, like, Kyle, this very white boy, asked his family if they're Indians. He has that one point, he goes, "We aren't
that was
Indians, are
such a
we?"
marker. That was like one of the first scenes that I was like, oh, this movie's really like from 20 years ago. Is that Disney Channel used the word Indians to refer to Native Americans, and I'm
Mhm,
like, oh, that's like. I remember even being in like fourth grade when my teachers were like, we call them Native Americans, we don't call them Indians.
mhm. Well, there are, like, a
Um,
few, tribes that prefer Indians, so it kind of
yeah,
it depends. Yeah, no, and it was also strange that there was such this weird idea of, like, if I like the big so, I mean, at the beginning of the movie, the big thing is like, let's get our luck back. But then it started being like, we want our luck back. And the villain was going to take the grandfather as a slave. And I thought that was like
yeah,
a weird thing
that
where it
came
was
out at
like,
like the last minute of like where they set up the final like bet of like the climax or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah,
that is a term that you don't really throw around.
yeah, yeah. Cause like, then there's Russell still in the freaking, like, car, just, like, chilling, and he actually has a history of enslaved people, and these people
Yeah.
are just I just
But it is very interesting that it's like a whole movie about this like type of white culture,
mhm,
um, you know, assimilating to a different type of white culture or whatever. And then you have these two side characters that you have like this Afro Latina woman who both parents who they hired to play or both actors who they hired to play her parents were whiter than she is. Um, and that's never addressed. They just say her last name's Lopez. And then you have this part Cherokee, part African American boy. So these are two like Black and Indigenous people of color who they
we
just
focus
never
on the
explore
half
any of
leprechaun.
their culture, except for like this Hispanic girl. Her parents are just like really about her going to college, which
Mhm,
stresses her out. But yeah, it's very interesting that they're like it's not explored at all, and these
yeah.
cultures are like face a lot more of the discrimination than quote unquote like these Irish leprechauns were
Yeah,
facing 200 years ago. But we don't explore that. I think it was maybe too hot button of an issue in 2000.
mhm.
But
Well, I like that there's a book that he buys, like, what everything you need to know about being Irish that you were too afraid to ask.
too afraid to
What
ask.
were
Who's
you afraid
afraid?
to ask?
who who was like really? It's like wow.
What would
Who's
you be
afraid of their
afraid?
Irish heritage? Oh my god. But that's like yeah. That is something though with cultures that aren't white but like can pass as white, they'll like hide it.
Mhm,
Like there are stories about um Jewish people being not being told that they're Jewish. There was a movie actually with the actress Ramala Garai about this movie, and Hugh Dancy, about this man who was lied to about being Jewish, and then he sort of like comes into his own about the culture. But those movies and storylines are always about like acknowledging this part of their past they didn't know about, and like celebrating it, and like sort of loving that part of themselves. Whereas the luck of the Irish is like, no, the true luck is forgetting and not caring about your Irish heritage, accepting it under the guise of being like, but really the truth of the matter is that I'm just American.
Yeah.
And that's what's important, is that we're all American, and none of our past heritage matter as much as my American identity. And I'm like,
Well,
wow, that is a sell
yeah.
made by Disney.
Yeah, well, like here are a few. I wrote down a lot of lines that they mentioned. Um, so he says, "We're Americans." The dad says, "We're Americans, Kyle. That's the only heritage we need."
Yeah.
And
There's also a line where they say, I don't have heritage.
yeah. Well, then they also say being an individual is what being an American is all about.
Yeah.
And then let's also talk about how, like, if they, I think Disney Channel thought they were being a little subtle. And so they literally made the basketball team the Soaring Eagles.
Oh my God. Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. Also, in the beginning of the film, there's also a line where um, the girl, Bonnie, she's asking him about his heritage for Heritage, what was it? Heritage Fest, Heritage Night, or whatever. And he's like, that is so lame, celebrating your heritage. And then he says a line, it's like so public television.
What does
Which
that
is
mean?
that's Disney Channel taking a dig at PBS. Because when I was a kid, I didn't know PBS was like public television. I didn't know what public versus private meant. But as someone who grew up on PBS Kids net like programming and also worked for PBS, I'm like, whoa. Because I guess it's like Disney Channel and PBS, they were like competitive, I guess, or like capitalist versus public subsidized socialist programming. And I'm like, wow, this really is a capitalist movie that's like selling these capitalistic ideals that are a farce and a lie, not to be uber political, but I'll do that on our Safe Space podcast. And then after, in my notes, I say after the line about public television, I have the note, is Ryan a white supremacist?
Well, he says, history is so 10 minutes ago. Now sports.
And
That's what's happening now.
That's
That's
also
where
a
I'm
very
coming from.
American thing. Because there are points in the movie where they're like, oh, back in the 1800s, like back in my day. And even though it's only 2 generations that they have in the movie, he's like, that was 100 years ago. That was 200 years ago. Like, get over it, which is very like, okay, let's not trash intergenerational trauma, and let's not minimize the effects of intergenerational trauma, because those are huge. But that's the very American ideal of like leaving your past behind in your homeland and coming to America and starting anew. And it's also very it's a very Don Draper mentality, the true American man, American dream of the critically acclaimed TV show Mad Men, which I love. There's a line in Mad Men where he says, there is no American history, only an American frontier.
Oh, wow.
And I feel like that was like the most eloquent way to say what the Luck of the Irish tried to do. And both are very problematic sentiments.
There's a lot. There's a lot. I mean, I think that it was really weird how, like, Kyle was so upset that his whole thing that he wasn't talented at anything, that it was just luck. Because it's
Yeah.
like, what did you think? There is literally a line where he's like, I'm just a lucky guy. And then someone says, lucky shot, Kyle. And then he says, luck's got nothing to do with it. And it's like, what
But
are you talking
it's
about?
literally an allegory for white privilege, because he's able to pass as this WASP person that he's never had to try. He's never had bad luck, or i.e. like discrimination. He's never been discriminated against for being Irish or whatever. Like,
Well, then there's also that moment where he's not paying attention to a test and he just randomly bubbles in things and they're all right.
Yo,
You would have
I
been sent to the principal's office for that.
yes, he would have been accused of like cheating, and I guess
Or
with
having the
technology
answer key or something.
of today, yeah, like cheating is easier. But I literally wrote that down, like that scene where he guesses the test answers and gets them all right, like burned into my brain as a child. Like
Mhm.
that was like I'm an eighth Irish. Like I need to call that within me next time I take a test, and like I was like, you know what, if God's on my side, if the luck of the Irish is on my side, like it'll work. When really, don't do that. Also, it was a callback to the old days of teachers subtracting points for wrong answers.
Mhm.
That's like, I don't, at least in our school systems, that has been long gone, done
Yeah.
away with. We don't do that anymore. And I don't remember why exactly, but I was like, oh yeah, the SATs like used to be like that or currently like that. But
Mhm.
um
For you, was St. Patrick's Day a big thing in school?
it was, and I think I asked some of my other friends a while ago if they shared this like elementary school experience, and they were like, "No, we didn't make a big deal out of it." But in my school, um, they like made a little tiny leprechaun out of like construction paper, and they took like cotton ball material, and they colored it with orange marker and would like make the beard, and then they would place like pieces of cotton colored orange around the classroom, and we'd have to go on a scavenger hunt to like find the leprechaun,
Oh wow.
and we'd like go on a little treasure hunt around the school and stuff, and they'd like paint things green. Like it was a huge thing when I was like kindergarten, first grade, and then after that it wasn't. But
Yeah, I think it was just like we all wore green, and if you didn't, then you were bullied for the rest of the day. And also, like,
yeah.
everyone wore the pins that was like "Kiss me, I'm Irish," even though we're in like
Oh
the
yeah, I
second
remember
grade.
that.
I also don't understand that. I'm trying to start up "Give me a back massage, I'm Indian," if you wanna spread that around. I don't know if every
That's a good
cultural
one.
group can just
I don't
start
know if I
one.
want people coming up and putting their hands on my shoulders from behind.
Well, only when I
But
wear the pin in a safe
oh,
space.
okay. That's the consent.
Did you notice how many fish these people had on their walls? I felt like
I didn't notice any fish.
the
I noticed
set
all of the
design,
green. They had so
no,
much green.
well, it was like it was the most generic, like, home where they just had, like, maybe a few pictures, but everything else was just, like, random china, but then in a room, they just had a bunch of, like, fish on the wall, which was
Oh.
just the classic, like I don't even know, do they have, like, a lake? I don't even know.
Oh well, Lake Erie is like a big thing.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah, I don't know. There was definitely like part of it because part of the movie was like him going through these body changes and like turning
Mhm.
into a leprechaun. And that is a big theme in a lot of Disney Channel movies
Yeah.
and a lot of like coming of age, young, you know, pubescent boy movies where
13th
and girl
year.
movies where they're like turning into this either like a monster, an animal, and it's like it like correlates with puberty, and it
Mhm.
is sort of like a metaphor for the changes your body goes through when you're a young teen.
Except he can cover
Um,
his up.
yeah,
You couldn't I
but
couldn't cover up anything.
yeah, but it was interesting how they sort of painted being a leprechaun as sort of this like magical thing, but also sort of like a bit like a monster, but sort of like towing that line. It was a situation where like when he like dances randomly or his
God.
hair turns a certain color or whatever, like it's part of that magical realism that Disney likes to use for kids movies, but it's also part of a common kids movie thing where it's like I went to school the next day of like everybody having seen this movie, and everybody was like trying to Irish dance at recess. I literally there was a kid, not to out him because how will he ever track this down, but there was a kid named Bryce in my class who literally came to school. I don't know if he had younger siblings who he lied to for fun or whatever. I don't know why he thought he would get away with it, but he came to school and literally was like, "My mom is a leprechaun." And he was wearing this green hat to school, and he was like, "She's inside my hat." and she follows me around all day, and like I know how to Irish dance. And I'm like, me and this other girl were like, we've seen the movie Luck of the Irish. We know you're lying. Don't lie.
That
And
was
he
a
was like,
documentary, right? The film was
yeah.
a documentary.
And he was like, no, it really happened. Like it's based on a true story. And like, I'm that true story. And I'm like, you're 5. But
Yeah,
yeah,
no,
I also, his name was Bryce, I'm pretty sure. I spent that entire school year thinking his name was Rice because I didn't know what the fuck white names were. But anyways,
No, I think the whole scene where like they go to the Irish festival, I thought that whole part was just they see the sign and it's like an Irish dancer. His name is like Seamus
famous.
McTiernan. It's covered in like four-leaf clovers. And Russell's like, hey, I think this guy might be Irish. What gave it
Yeah,
away?
it's very interesting though because I thought the dancing was so cool. I thought, I mean, because I was coming to the movie also like being told I was like a little bit Irish too. That I was like, oh, this is so cool. Like I had a friend in the neighborhood who was like super super Irish, and so she Irish danced, and I thought Irish dancing was so cool. And like I don't know, I remember so vividly the flowy shirts with the arms. I was like, that's so sick.
I had a
But their
fight with an
sleeves are
Irish
just
dancer.
huge. Huh?
I had a fight with an Irish
You had
dancer.
a fight with an Irish dancer?
Yeah.
Physically?
Well, no, I was just in the like auditorium
Oh,
practicing like a tap dance routine and this random girl came in and was like, "I heard there's a tap dancer in here. I'm an Irish dancer." She jumped on stage and said, "Let's go."
wow, the ultimate feud, tap
It was
dancing
the
versus
first time that
Irish
my life had
dancing.
ever felt like High School Musical, and we just
Dance
started
off.
dancing, and then I
That's
never saw her
amazing.
ever again.
Yeah, but I
She
definitely
was
like
a leprechaun.
watching.
I feel like I was her final leprechaun battle, and now I never saw her again because she's
Wow.
tiny.
I mean, watching it as a kid, like all of these like anti-assimilation or yeah, I mean like all these like assimilation overtones and like themes like went over my head, and I was just like, oh, being Irish is so cool.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think
so
the idea that like every Irish person has a superpower that when they hear an Irish song, they can't help but dance. Like
yeah.
imagine if that was the new 23andMe. Instead of like spitting in a tube, they just play you a bunch of different songs and like when Bollywood comes on, I'm like, what is
Yeah.
happening to me?
Yeah, and I feel like every kid sort of like loves that idea of like having superpowers and like finding things out about themselves and stuff like that. Some non-Irish things that I did like about the movie that made me nostalgic for that time in my life were the like 2000s ska music in the background of like the go-kart chase and stuff like that. I was like, oh yeah, this really is 2000s, where you hear like the ska music in the background of like you hear it in Clueless and in 10 Things I Hate About You, that like ska kind of background music. And then the computer, like the library he goes to, the computers had that like
God.
neon clear casing, and their computer screens are like these huge cubic triangular things. Yeah, the $8 entrance fee to the festival, I was like, yeah, that'd probably be $20 today.
Yeah, inflation. Well, I think also, um, I liked the weird little pasta dish she served for dinner one night. She served like a pasta dish in a lettuce bowl, and she was like, "Eat your salad." And I was like,
Oh my
"You
god,
can't
yeah.
call it a
There were
salad."
huge leaves
And
of lettuce on this bowl that like
no
weren't
one
being
was eating
eaten.
that. And she's like, "I got it from
And it
Eat
was like this
Smart
pasta thing that
magazine."
was very weird.
And the dad was like, "You're lucky your mom makes such healthy meals for you, Kyle." They kept using his name as if, like, they would need to remind themselves or
Yeah,
they needed to make a good impression, which made me think that he's definitely a spy because, like, they were wondering why he changed his name. And also, like, I feel like they were like, "We needed to change our name so that the leprechauns wouldn't find us." Was was Bob Smith a very unique name that you had to go
yeah.
into hiding?
That's definitely like a callback to
I like that
um
as a weapon they threw, like, corned beef and cabbage.
yeah. And then I was like, My Irish friends like eat a lot of corned beef, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize that was a thing.
I think there are also just like a lot of things in this movie that just went over my head as a child. Like the
Okay.
grandfather describes good Irish leather as soft as a spring shower and tough as a landlord's heart.
And I'm like, wow, 2020 vibes. But also, there's a point where so many cars break down in this movie. There's a
Mhm.
point where the grandfather opens up his green convertible and his engine is just shoes. His
Well, no,
engine
no,
is
no.
just Irish shoes.
But
Or is that his
then
trunk?
they also find a gun, so he's more American than we thought.
They find a gun? I didn't
Yeah,
catch that.
Russell's just holding a gun, and then he just like puts it back once they start running for the rainbow.
Oh my God. Wow.
I
Was that a
think that's what
reference
it
to
was. It
like
was like a big rifle.
England, America of the 1800s?
That's crazy. But there's definitely like that scene where they're in the car and it's raining, um, just randomly, unexplained. There is that sort of like speech of like, oh, like Americans don't give up, and like that's how the Irish overcame their struggle, wasn't through, you know, our country like becoming a more just and fair system, but like they just tried hard and worked hard and they overcame it.
It wasn't the
Well,
white people learning to be less discriminatory. It was the Irish people working harder. So it's like, oh, if you're struggling, you just have to work harder. You're not
yeah.
working hard enough.
I mean, I think the other side of it is like it was hard to tell if this movie implied that every Irish person was a leprechaun or if the leprechaun Irish were a certain breed of
Yeah, right.
Irish because it seemed to like just mainly focus on the problems of like leprechauns and I was just very
Yeah.
confused.
Honestly, I think the movie did kind of sort of make that statement where it was like all Irish people are leprechauns.
Mhm.
And to be a real human, you have to be American.
Yeah.
So as the people from other countries are just this other brand of non-human.
Yeah.
But we never find out where the dad is from. It is
No, cuz he's a
interesting that
spy.
yeah, it is interesting that though, like historically interracial marriages, you know, they've faced a lot of backlash and discrimination, but they've fared better legally and culturally of like not being so demonized when it's a white man choosing an other wife.
Mm.
Whereas if it's like with the famous interracial marriage case of the 70s with, I think it's Loving. I forget who it was, the title of the court case, but it's like Loving versus something America. I have no idea. But it's a white man with a black wife, and they get arrested and they face, you know, legal charges and stuff like that. But people were like, if it was a black man trying to marry a white woman, they would have just killed the black man.
Mhm. Yeah.
It is interesting that Disney chose the mom route of the mom being the leprechaun and the other versus the dad, because you take like the dad's last name and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So more authority to his American side or
Mhm.
whatever. Smith, Johnson, we really never know the cultural identity of his dad. Which is also why the catalyst of the movie almost is him saying like, "Dad, where are you from?"
Yeah.
And they could have just avoided the whole mom thing,
And we
and could
also
have just
don't
been
meet his family
yeah, the dad could
or
have just been like, "Oh, my family's like European or German or whatever." Like they could have also just like been like, I don't know, Nordic something. They could have just like they didn't have to go back to a specific country. You could have just been like, I'm white and European.
yeah.
And
Well,
he could have
then
just been like,
Bonnie is
"Oh."
like, "Well, where is your mom from?" And he's like, "Well, didn't really think about her." And then it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
so he definitely like this whole Irish side wasn't the beginning of the film and we just kind of lose sight of I definitely think that this whole thing was orchestrated by the father as a con to get them away cuz like um after they find out that like they're Irish or something um Russell says Well, what about, like, remember how you told me about how your dad changed his name? What do you think that's about? And he's like, "That's not important anymore." So
He
it was
literally says that's
definitely
not important
it
anymore.
was definitely orchestrated by the father as a distraction.
It really is. No, because there's a line where Russell says like maybe he like was witness protection or in the FBI where he needed to like shield his
A
identity.
hitman.
Yeah, and later they're like, oh no, we were just like hiding our identities from her dad, which is like, I mean, if the family finds you, like, what are they gonna do? They're
Yeah.
not the police.
I also was wondering, like, how do you think you would feel if you were just a random, like, attendant of this basketball game? Would you never
Yeah,
wonder why there's an old man strung up on the net? But for some reason, when the mom comes in and everything, she's like, "What's Da doing up there?" What or something, and so she can see it. So I don't know if
yeah.
it's
Maybe
only our
it's like
main
a
characters.
leprechaun thing. Yeah,
Do you want a
but
fun fact?
oh, okay, sure.
So the kid Drake, who Kyle is really jealous of because he
Hmm.
starts making all the
Ooh,
baskets.
with that bowl cut, with the butt cut,
Mhm.
with the middle part that guys used to have, and then it and this that and that. Anyway, continue.
He was responsible for Troy and Gabriella getting together because he was the DJ in High School Musical when they're at that random ski resort on New Year's Eve.
Wow, what a decom icon. I
I
didn't know that at
know.
all.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But yeah, with the basketball game, the grandfather gives Russell a coin so that Russell starts performing better. And he just like starts performing better. And they're like, what? He's not Irish. And the grandfather's not, they're like, no, it's a placebo. Like, he just thinks he has luck. And so he's confident, which is so basically all this trouble that has happened in this guy's life by losing his lucky coin is like, oh, you just need like confidence and then
Yeah.
it's fine. So it's like all of these, like all the Irish discrimination, all the assimilation, all the everything is like, you can overcome all that, uh, all those struggles if you just have like white boy confidence. Like if you have the confidence of this guy when he thought he was just like a Johnson, completely white, not Irish, and like all his luck intact, forgetting his culture, like that's all the confidence he needed. That's all the luck he needed was just like that confidence. And so once he gets that confidence back, he like didn't need his Irish heritage at all.
Well, I
He
think
just needs that white boy confidence of Americans, and then you don't need your heritage.
and I think that goes back to the little, like, games thing because I was kind of in it until the dancing,
Oh yeah, I think he
because,
incorporates like
like, he
breakdancing into it.
incorporates breakdancing and then he wins, and it's like, "Who fucking judged this?" Like, who was the judge?
Yeah,
But then, like, did the gods just be like, "Ooh, he had some sick moves. He wins." But, like, I mean, if you wanna talk about something where it's like, let's just forget about our culture. I mean, obviously, Seamus did the more traditional Irish dance,
yeah,
and Kyle was like, let me get on that dance floor." And
yeah.
I don't know.
The themes in the movies are very. It's a very like your future is more important than your past theme, and it's very like who you are as an American is more important than like your old heritage. I do like the idea like the present is very valuable. Like you don't have to be beholden to your past or the traumas of your parents or whatever. And just in a general statement, not speaking culturally. But at the end of the day, like I don't like this movie sort of asserting that they're competing against each other. Like you don't have to fight between like your future here as an American versus your past and your culture. Like they're not, this isn't a battleground podcast. We're not at war. You don't have to fight your past with your future, you know. You can accept who you are and also be deciding it at the same time versus rejecting your past in order to have a future, which in America that was the case a lot of the time, and certainly the case for Ryan Merriman.
Um, can I mention another part that I really liked in the film? So, he's talking about how he lost his coin, and they're like, "Oh, there was this old man who was there." And the mom goes, "What's this about an old man? Gray in the hair, was he? Why is that a defining feature? Doesn't that all old men?"
what was the term she used?
She said gray in the hair, was he?
Gray in the hair.
Like, you
Yeah,
mean what
that's all
happens
old
when
men.
everyone gets old? The
It's like, oh, I saw an
icons.
old man the other day, and I'm like, oh, did he have gray hair? That's my dad. The only guy who has gray hair.
But can we talk about how just incredible the friends in this movie were? The friends were just icons. Like, Silvana, would you jump in a car if I told you that we were gonna chase a rainbow for a pot of gold? Would you just go with it?
Dude, I loved how Bonnie like went from like lawful good to like chaotic neutral in a split second after the potato
Well, because
factory.
she
She
was
was
like,
like, I hate being a young achiever suddenly.
I think I like the part where she's like, my dad thought that being a young achiever would look good on a college application. Um, but how often do you help a clan of leprechauns find their luck? And I hope with all of me that this is what she wrote her college essay on.
Right? Oh my God.
So we chased this guy in an RV. He threw corned beef and cabbage at us.
Cabbage.
And at this point, my friend's mom was like, maybe a foot. So this is why I want to
Oh my
get into
God.
Harvard.
Yeah. Also, I love how he sings at the end. Because this boy, he needed a solo to round out the movie.
Yeah.
That was what was gonna heal the racial tensions in America. Was this white boy wearing this Cleveland's jersey is singing "This Land Is My Land."
Well, I think it's very strange how America is explained versus Ireland because Seamus's whole thing is like it was a king we had in Ireland and I will
Yeah,
be a king of
that was a big
leprechauns.
moment.
And instead of Kyle talking about like our democratic process, he goes, "We don't believe in kings, we believe in baseball."
We believe in baseball or basketball.
I think he
What
said
did he believe in?
baseball. He said baseball.
Oh
He doesn't even
yeah,
believe in his own
that's
sport.
which is like
But
the true capitalistic American. Like America's true king is capitalism and sports marketing.
But speaking of baseball, it did very much look like it was the same exact school that they used in Eddie's $1 million cook-off.
Oh
And
wow.
I'm just hoping at the same exact time this guy is grappling between his baseball urges and his urges of being a chef. And it's all happening at
Amazing.
once. And you want to go to I feel like you want to go to every single sporting event at this school just to see what the heck is going to happen.
Oh my God. So true. But yeah, that was a big thing that I was like, oh yeah, I forget that the base of America's identity is the like revolt against the monarchy. But also the Ireland like hates the king. Like, or at least I don't know. I don't know a ton about Irish history, but like Ireland was always revolting against the British king all the
Mhm.
time. Of course they hate kings too. Um I don't know what does Ireland have a president?
Honestly,
No idea.
maybe prime minister? Maybe it's
Prime minister? Because I know France has a president
mhm.
and
Yeah,
then England
we
has a prime
we
minister.
should have
So,
researched more before we said.
right? Oh my God, dumb
But Disney
Americans.
Channel should have like educated us.
Right? But also, it's like that was the basis of like the American superiority complex against any Europeans was like, well, we have a president and like you guys have kings and queens.
But
So,
this
like,
time we have baseball.
yeah. Oh my God.
What do you think about all the endings for all the characters? Do you think that Seamus deserved to literally just drown? I guess that was kind of glossed
Wow.
over as a child that he just like lives in the water now. And I was like, oh, he's just
I was
like
very confused
a
by that
mermaid.
visual. Yeah.
But I think he's just dead, that he just like drowned him. And that's
Yeah.
actually a
And I'm like,
lot
are
darker.
leprechauns immortal? So is he just like bound there forever? Also, it was a point where he was like, "Oh, you're pronouncing that wrong. Like in the homeland, it's actually pronounced this way." And then he's like, "No, the real pronunciation is the white way to say it, the white Americanized way to say this word."
But I think it's
Um,
also ironic that that was like the one smart thing that Kyle ever did. And he
yeah,
also stole that from his mother because the mother originally told
yeah,
her father that he her new husband
Yeah.
or boyfriend at the time hailed from the shores of
Yeah.
Erie. So he
I mean,
did
it just
nothing. He did nothing.
he really didn't. Yeah, it did bother me at the end though when she sort of comes out and sings the song with him as the token she's the non-white coming to the union.
Mhm.
Um and then they show her parents in the audience and her parents are so much paler than her. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, come on.
And all of our
Also,
main characters stand.
yeah, also, can we talk about how Russell's dad was never confirmed Russell's dad until the very end of the movie where he's like, my son! And goes and hugs Russell. But I was like, oh, the one black man
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
shot, he has to be Russell's dad because it's like, come on.
Mhm.
So sad, but
But
yeah.
I think if you, like, wanted to do a movie about the oppression of people who came to this country, I feel like Irish
Yeah.
was a strange pick.
Yeah. And it's like they didn't even want to do Italians.
Yeah. But
they
then why
they
did they
wanted the
go
palest of the pale,
but I feel
the
like
Irish.
if you're gonna go with the Irish, then go all in with, like, just all white people. Don't just, like, put, like, people of color on, like, the periphery. Like, it just seemed very strange.
Yeah.
But I
Like,
feel like Russell was like Jim from The Office as he's sitting and listening to all these white people complain about how they
right?
lost their lucky coin and that they
Yeah.
had to work for
Yeah.
jobs that
But it's
nobody
very
wanted. And it's like, are
it's
you
very
kidding?
indicative of like race in America in the year 2000 where the black guy was like, well, at least they got paid and then
Mhm.
they just were like
Hmm,
they don't fight it, but they don't address it.
good
They're just it's like
point.
that
Let's
elephant
move
in the
on.
room. Right?
Let's look at our shoes. They're good for the soul.
So she
Did
was
you
like,
have like
no.
a heritage day in school?
We did. We didn't really do like a ton for it. I remember
Mhm.
sometimes I in some schools I went to, Heritage Day became like a talent show day
Yeah,
where they'd
yeah.
like a performative aspect of their culture they'd do. But
Mhm.
it wasn't like I remember in elementary school we'd like bring in food and that was a thing.
Mhm.
But
'Cause I feel like not all cultures are performative or like
yeah.
that's not always a part that you kind of do. So I
Yeah.
liked
Well, because
how
a lot
at
of
our
cultures like they'll have like a dance or a
Mhm.
specific ceremonial dress that you wear. Whereas
Yeah.
like I don't know, like in Bolivia, like you just wear normal clothes.
Mhm.
You don't there are like other cultures within the country that have things like that, but they're more specific than just like this country does this one thing.
Yeah.
Whereas,
Yeah, because
there are a lot of different cultures within Bolivia.
I mean, I'm only like half Indian and so it wasn't as big of a thing, but I think like if I came to school, like I could get like I'm sure we have like saris and stuff in the house and I could like perform Indian, but I feel like sometimes these like I like the idea of Heritage Day or like learning about other cultures, but some of it is like we're gonna take this really stereotyped version and show you this, and this is
Yeah.
how we dress all the like it makes it seem like this is how we dress constantly at home and stuff, and it just kind of seems I don't know, like
Yeah.
it doesn't always seem super authentic just to have like
Yeah.
one day where it's like we'll go back to our cultures and then after this land is your land and it's my land and we're all Americans and we can just go back to forgetting.
It's interesting to think about growing up like being a bicultural person in 2000s America.
Yeah, no, I mean like a lot of people would ask me or like there was this one time when we were I don't know I think it might have been like a drama class or something and we were describing like plays like culturally and like what different plays go on and someone talked about like what like cultural plays are in like Mexico and this one girl in the class was like, "Marriya, you talk about it." I was like, "What are you?" This was like in
Yeah.
college and I was like, "What are you?"
Wow. Yeah, it is like it's also a very separate experience to be not only like, someone who doesn't look white in America, but also specifically to be a racially ambiguous person in America.
Mhm.
Because then you do get those questions that are like, oh, where are you from? Whereas like if someone looks specifically one thing, they might not get asked as much.
Yeah.
like I've been identified to policemen as being a Middle Eastern woman. And I'm like, it's nice to know that I'll get away with crimes because no one will know how to identify my race. Like I was also like, I'm definitely white passing, and as a kid I was much tanner, but it was also something kids asked me about all the time. But also in middle school, I remember a kid in middle school, because I was always, in the advanced classes or the separated classes for honors or whatever. And this kid was like, I always thought you were half Asian. And I'm like, oh, well, I guess I have some features that might be perceived that way. But he was like, oh, well, you like had Asian friends and like you were in all the smart classes. So I just thought you were Asian. And I'm like, you didn't think a Hispanic person could be in advanced classes? Racist. But,
Do you
but
prefer if someone asks or if they assume?
I'm totally cool with people asking me if it's like, because it's a casual thing, and like I love talking about my family and I'm very proud of my heritage, but I hate it when people think it's weird to ask or want to know,
Mm-hmm.
or they feel guilty about the reasons why they want to know, and so they'll go a roundabout way. They're like, oh, Silvana, that's an interesting name, where is that from? Or they're like, they'll ask me where my uh mom is from and stuff like that. But because also my name's Italian, and Italian names are very popular in South America, but it's Italian, and so I'll be like, oh, it's Italian, and then it'd be like, oh, okay, and there'll be no follow-up, and I'm like, oh, so now you just think I'm Italian? I'm not Italian. I also don't look Italian. I just have dark hair, so that always annoys me.
I think like names are also strange because I think like names are also going away from like culture. It's just like people are picking random names now,
And
like McKaylee or whatever and
yeah, the
stuff.
first names are getting more intricate.
And I don't know. I think like I have a very Jewish name for both first and last name. And so like people ask me all the time if I'm Jewish.
Mm,
And like I don't know. I guess I would prefer if they just like came out and asked me because there was a one time when a guy started following me at the Holocaust Museum and like trying to like ask me out in the Holocaust Museum because
oh
like
my god,
that's
I think you told me that once. I'm
it's
so
like
sorry.
that's
You
the
poor
place that
girl.
you do it. And I was telling my therapist about like this weird thing where this guy was following me and she was like, "And so that bothered you because," and I was like, "Because I was trying to just walk through the Holocaust Museum and learn and this guy kept bugging me." And she was like, "But from a family basis it bothered you because the Holocaust was bad." And she's like, "Oh, your personal connections to the Holocaust probably played a part." And I was like, "What personal connections to the Holocaust?" She's like, "Well, honey, you're Jewish." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I
Yeah,
mean, like, nothing against, like, being Jewish or anything, but I feel like so many times people just kind of assume. And
yeah,
obviously, I mean, I didn't love being followed in the Holocaust Museum because it's a sad museum and the Holocaust is evil, and
yeah.
you didn't have to have, like, a serious personal family relationship, but
Yeah, I've definitely it's weirded me out when people have assumed my ethnicity and then just not ask me about it. Because then I'm like, oh, what made you so confident?
yeah.
It is very interesting. But it was always something I was very proud of. Like I was always proud that I wasn't just white or something like that when I was a kid. Because my mom was she was very proud of her heritage, and she wasn't like, she's very respectful. She was like, you're in a new country. Like she was like, I came to America, I have to respect their way of life. Just like people who come to Bolivia, they have to respect the Bolivian way of life. But she was also very much like, I'm not gonna like eat white people food. She's like, I'm not gonna change my values as a person just because I'm in this country.
Mhm.
And her criticism of white culture as a kid really influenced me. And so I am very critical of white culture because my mom would like point out white people in America and be like, look how weird that is. Don't do that. And so I'm thankful for that upbringing that wasn't super assimilation focused as maybe Kyle Johnson's upbringing was.
Bring
But
it back. A lot
But
to unpack from the luck of the Irish.
yeah, right. I was surprised because I just had like fond memories of Ryan dancing in the back of my head. And then I rewatched it and I'm like, wow, there's so much to unpack here, so
Yeah.
many layers to this experience.
Mhm.
I also think because in the movie they talk about immigrants coming in the 1800s and like it being so many years ago.
Mhm.
And now I think, at least in our age group, we've kind of grown up with this much more recent wave of immigration and like
Mhm.
having those dynamics be more at play
Yeah. Well,
within
that
the
was
racial atmosphere than like, the immigrants of the 1800s or whatever.
yeah. I mean, like that was something that I wondered, like, because it kind of felt like we're okay with immigrants as long as they've been here for a while and they've like
Yeah,
made their way. They've created a potato chip company and the potato chips are good,
yeah,
and that's
yeah. It's
fine.
like they wait long enough so that they assimilate, so that they're like they wait long enough until they have that white privilege,
Mhm.
at least for like Irish and Italian Americans,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah, because I
you move
think
on
like
to the next immigrant.
one of the interesting things was that there was no real discussion. I mean, all of the discussion of discrimination was all in the past for these characters. That it
Yeah,
was like
yeah,
it
it
already
was.
happened.
Even the Black and Indigenous characters in the movie too.
Yeah.
And there like multiple lines in the movie where they're like, "It happened a long time ago. It's not
Yeah.
important anymore."
Yeah,
And I
because
think that was
Russell
a big
was
part of the American narrative, where it was like slavery was so long ago. We're not beholden to our past in America. I don't have to repent the sins
yeah.
of
Because like
American past. When there's intergenerational trauma that is completely ignored and disrespected basically in this movie.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it would be interesting to see what would happen if these characters interacted with like a recent immigrant and the entire like thing
Yeah,
about, like, they're gonna take our jobs and all of that
yeah,
element, it just felt like it was all
yeah,
over and, like, now we're just America and that's blended and
yeah.
people think like that.
And it was definitely a weird thing to hear, the kind of narrative where it's like they're talking about the discrimination of 200 years ago, and I'm like, oh, that's what's happening to Hispanic and Mexican immigrants right now, and like Latin American immigrants, and that's the narrative that they're still facing and that Americans still have against immigrants, and like taking the jobs that nobody else wants and stuff like that. um, and that their solution was like, and the Irish people, they just worked hard and like they got over it and they became successful in America. Like that's how they solved the problem of discrimination, instead of the white people stopping being discriminatory. But obviously it is a different issue because Irish people are able to like assimilate characteristically, typically, whereas um Hispanic and Central American, immigrants, they have that racist discrimination about how they look too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's, whereas like, you know, discrimination or racism or discrimination against Irish people is like, when they're all white people, it's easy to get over it.
Mhm.
It's like when Thomas Jefferson made that he wrote that piece about how, let's get over the religious persecution. We're all Christians here. And I'm like, oh, well, what about the religious persecution for Jewish people and Muslim people and everybody else? It's over. It's easy to get over when you're all just different shades of Christian.
Yeah.
It's
I
easy to
mean,
move
like,
past the discrimination when you're just shades of white.
I just think it's so funny how, like, white people will say, like, racism is over, and
Yeah.
it's like, how is that going to help people of color, like, when they're being, like, followed with, like, guns and stuff?
Yeah.
They can't just shout, like, "Didn't you hear racism is over?" And then they'll be like, "Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Did not get that news alert. Guys, racism is over. We don't have to, like, persecute
It's
or
so sad.
discriminate
Yeah.
anymore." And, like, I think there's also this idea of I mean, like, obviously, gender and race is different, but, um, there's also like, I've heard a lot of men say that men and women are equal, and it's just like it's so easy for you to
Yeah.
say that
But
we
it's also,
accomplished it when it's not you.
yeah, but it's also, it's like, it's easy for a white man to say, because I believe women and men are equal and I don't analyze my own actions, that it's solved, because
Yeah.
I don't think that way and I don't have to worry about anybody else's problems but myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, freshman year of college, like, this one guy wrote about we watched some movie about, like, suffrage and stuff, and he was like, "I don't understand why everyone else is complaining on this discussion post. Men and women are equal, there is no wage gap." And I was like, "Y'all break out the
Yeah.
champagne, get the confetti, we did it! I didn't even realize that we did it."
Oh my God.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
not
it
so
was a
easy.
different time, but I like how Disney Channel sees all of this and they're like, "We're on it, leprechauns."
Yeah, but I guess it was their way of like, let's make a like a heritage celebratory movie and like woo diversity without having to address any like heavy issues ever.
I just wanna know if any Irish people were involved in this because it really doesn't feel like they were.
I mean, it's the kind of thing where it's like probably like 60% of the white men on the movie were like distantly Irish. But
I think
I
someone's
don't know
like
if they like
so
hired an Irish culture consultant that they were like, what's, you know, what's food? What's cabbage? What's corned beef? Yeah, they really relied heavily on 1800s dress and food
Mhm.
and weird sports games,
And
which
the
I
language.
I would
Oui,
literally
da.
want to know, like speak to a person living in Ireland saying like, is this, do people know about these historical games? Did you learn about this in school? But were those actually played? But like throwing boulders,
Yeah. And throwing the chariot wheel, that was interesting.
a
A lot of
chariot wheel.
throwing.
And I'm like, what the fuck is a chariot? Oh my god. They were just wagons. Like they had
Mhm.
wagons in the 1800s. I don't think they were called chariots since like ancient Rome, but okay.
Don't argue with Seamus, okay? Well, this went, I think,
Okay.
a lot a lot further than we
Well,
expected.
we've been speaking now for about a little under 2 hours. So we were talking last night and we were like, so how long do we want to make these episodes? Like half hour, hour, 45 minutes? And we were like,
We
yeah,
said
in
under
between
an
half an
hour.
hour. So we're either gonna have to edit a lot or it's just
Give
gonna be a
up.
long ass episode. I'm very scared to edit. I've also like I've known podcast shows that were just like, we ended up rambling a lot. So instead of editing that down, we just recorded a new episode. But I can't
Yeah,
do
we
this
could do
again.
part 1 and part 2.
We could, but that might be messy. That might be real messy. But I'm excited to see what past memory cultural moment we try to unpack
Mhm.
next year or
Next year.
next week.
Once per year. We're
Next
not
week,
like
next
other
week.
podcasters,
Yeah.
don't worry.
We truly were like, we want a safe space to reminisce and to like
Mhm.
be nostalgic. And we were like, let's tackle race in America, which,
This
you
year,
know,
next year's gender.
yeah, we can only talk about from our perspective
Mhm.
in relation to the Luck of the Irish movie. And it's a very complicated issue that we won't try to tackle completely. Or maybe ever again.
Yeah. Well,
um,
thank you everyone who tuned in.
Thank you
Uh,
to anyone who's listened to this long. I don't think there'll be many of you, so
the
feel
porn
special.
star bot from that
A
was
porn
with us
star
from
bot
the
from
very
SoundCloud.
beginning.
We'll see what happens. Maybe, hopefully, we'll get successful enough that we'll be able to take this episode down and showcase our perfect episodes of the future.
Which ones?
I don't know.
Well,
We
we'll
Yeah, we'll see what we'll cut out
yeah,
of this episode.
we'll see you next time on the Zillennial Support Group podcast.
We hope you felt supported
Or enraged.
or enraged or betrayed by your childhood memories that you thought were innocent and then it turned out to be incredibly racist and discriminatory. Anyways, we've
Bye.
been we've been Marriya and Silvana. Goodbye.
Bye. Should I stop recording?
Yeah, okay, I'll stop. Oh my God.